Good afternoon. Thanks for attending this session. You are in NSX PowerOps Day 2 operations. My name is Puneet Chawla. I'm one of the solutions architect at customer success team representing NSBU. I have my colleagues on stage today. Ahmad.
My name is Matt Connors. I'm an IT program manager at the University of New Hampshire.
All right. And my name is Ahmad Alam. I'm a colleague of Puneet. Thanks, Matt, for joining us. And we're honored that you guys are up here with your team. So down the session after the demo and stuff, we'll ask Matt to come back upstage and share his experience running the tool and how it has helped him. Thanks,
Great.
Matt.
Thanks, Ahmad.
All right, guys. So Puneet and I are part of NSBU Customer Success. As part of the Customer Success team, our goal is to help the customers with their deployment, adoption of the investment they have already made. All right. So throughout the tool, hopefully you'll see that intent being reflected. So quickly, this project is an open source project, so obviously there's no future related stuff. Customer Success is part of Global Services, which brings to you your GSS support and a lot of other things. So today we're going to talk about NSX, and we're going to focus on NSX in the private data center, focusing on NSX for vSphere. So NSX PowerOps for NSX for vSphere is the focus of today's conversation. Quick overview, the gist of that is we'll talk about what the project is, why we are doing it. I think it's very important to understand why we are doing it, and then we'll get to the demo. So initially we'll keep the pace a bit high because we want to get to the meat of it, right? And you don't want to see hear our backstory, but you want to see what the project is all about, I guess. So as part of our day-to-day, and I've been with NSBU for about 5 years. Puneet has been for about 2.5, 3 years. And combined, both of us, we've met, touched more than 500 NSX customers, conservatively speaking. So we are always out on the field helping customers. One of the things that we notice, and we get involved not just from pre-sales or post-sales, we just get involved with customer in their journey, and it could be any spot in the journey. Some of you may already, some of the guys I already know. So as part of that, when we go to the customer, let's say you go for escalations, you go for design reviews, there are two common things you ask. Hey, do you have any documentation of your environment? And unfortunately, the answer is usually no. Or yes, but it was done like a year ago, or it was done when the initial deployment was done, and nobody has kept it up to date. So that's one common challenge we saw. The second common challenge that we saw was when something broke. And your obvious question is, what changed? And because a lot of people are like, I don't know. Or as far as we know, nothing has changed, right? Because NSX is a distributed environment, sometimes the config may not have changed, but the realized state, the routing tables or some other things may have changed, right? So, and you may not have noticed, or you may not have done that intentionally. Now, the troubleshooting for that may take time, right? So those were the two very key aspects about the lack that we saw, or common theme that we noticed. And then the third thing was, oh, I'm doing an upgrade, I'm doing a maintenance, I'm doing blah, blah, blah. But I don't know how to check that if it went okay. Well, give me a list to go through, that kind of thing, right? So these three tenets were key when Puneet and we sat together last year, and we were like, we need to do something about this. And we feed this information back to our product management team, but you can imagine things take time to get productized. And as part of our goal, and goal that my director here, Damien, has set for me, and Damien is like, my name's got mentioned. All right. So the goal is to make customer successful right now, right? I can't wait for a year or something for the product to get a feature. We need to do this now. So we worked together to come up with this project. And the focus was to solve these three challenges. A common question is that how does it relate to the other tools that I already have, Log Insight, Network Insight. So the idea of this tool is to complement those tools. Those are monitoring tools. Those are the key tenants. You have to have them. There's no way around it. This is there to help you as an NSX operations guy, administrator. This is your advanced toolkit. This is the guy. This is the sidekick, the help that you need to go one step further. And our opinions are a bit biased because we worked on the project, right? So the tool was released last year at VMworld 2017. Version 1.0 was released. It was well received. We got a lot of feedback on that. And today we are releasing a version 2.5 of the tool.
Yep. Thanks, Mark. As you mentioned that we launched this product a year ago, so 1 year anniversary. We're really excited about it. We want to quickly go over our journey, what we have done in 1 year, what we have seen from the customer side. So as you can see on the slide, we have over 250 customers and partners deployment. These are active deployments that they are using. Of course, it's an open source tool, so it's a little hard to keep track of all the deployments and downloads, but we have a good approximate number. We also have over 25 features that we now adding to our new version 2.5. A lot of enhancements have been made to the tool since 1 year, and a lot of new features. A few new features like automated emails of your documentation are one of the cool things, and we have a huge list of it also. Around 7,400 lines of code. This is a PowerShell code, so it means a lot. We also seen a lot of traction on our blog, which is NSX-PowerOps.com. Over 26,000 hits, and as Hamad mentioned earlier, this week we are pleased to launch 2.5 version of our product. Of course, product for this scale can't be done by just two guys. We have a team backing up. We have Nick and Dale from our team and a few guys from PSO team. They are definitely backbone of this project and help us and support us with the project itself. But it's a community-based tool, so we have seen a lot of integration from the partners and few customers also. I want to quickly go over this slide and talk about what's really underneath the tool itself. From the beginning, we wanted to make this tool very modular. The reason behind it was all the dependencies between the code. We didn't want it that. All the features are not dependent to each other. That makes it very easy to develop, and because it's an open source, we wanted other people to be eased in for development purposes. So that helped a lot. And it also helped because some customer already had some kind of scripts running. So they're like, I don't want two different tools. If I have PowerShell script running somewhere, it's easy to just include this with this module, or other way around, you can include this module with your existing script. So that was, our main focus area in architecting it very modular. Underneath, we use PowerNSX a lot. Quick shout out to PowerNSX. It's built by our team, Nick and Dale, Anthony. If you're not using it, you should. Central CLI, REST APIs, we make all necessary calls to pull the information we need to document it. We also, as I mentioned earlier, PowerCLI is our backbone. We have few modules that we use, SSH and Pester. These are our dependencies. We need these to make the product run. But quickly on the SSH module thing, when we started, we were making a lot SSH calls to pull the information we needed. Most of them has been eliminated now because customers do not sometimes have SSH enabled on hosts. So we don't use this. There is only one test, health check test, that really uses it. Most of the information is via the REST API call or PowerNSX. Everything gets dumped into an Excel and a Visio. It's just easy to diff in Excel and see the differences between your previous versions and now. Excel is a mandatory tool to make this thing run. Visio is not. Visio is optional. And Yeah, that's about it. One important thing I kind of want to bring up from this slide is, if you're a customer who likes to develop, right? So you need to know all this information, and it's easy to integrate. But if you're a customer who are not into scripting or do not have time to script, you don't have to worry about any of the things that goes under the hood. All you have to know is it's a very easy to use tool. It's a menu-based. You just hit button 1, 2, 3, and it will do what you really want it to do.
Yeah, and another thing is that there's no internal hooks here. So all the calls, CLI, API are all publicly documented stuff. So we're not pulling any internal gimmicks. So if you open the code, you'd be able to make changes, modifications, whatnot. So it's interesting to have a takeaway slide before the demo. So just to highlight the things what we are focusing on. It has to be easy to use. No, you don't need to know scripting. That's one key thing we're making sure. Second thing, we are trying to make sure that you map the desired and realized state. So a quick, maybe 30-second spill on what that is and why that's a challenge is think about like in your traditional environment, you are at a physical router or switch, and you say like BGP neighbor this, right? And a couple other config commands, and then you say show IP route, and you see the routing tables, right? So if you think about it, the first thing that you did, defining the config, is your desired state, right? And then the routing table is the realized state that resulted because of that config. When we are in one place on a box on a router, you don't really think about that distinction because you don't have to. But when you come in a distributed environment like NSX, the routing config is done in a UI somewhere, in vCenter, NSX UI, where you define those things. The realization is distributed across hundreds of hypervisors, edges, DLRs. Now, how do you map those things, right? So how do you see the realized state and desired state? And then, unfortunately, we don't really make it much easy for our customers because the commands to get those routing tables at edges and DLRs and controllers and hosts are different, unfortunately. So what we are trying to do here is to document that desired state and realized state together in one view, and also provide you cookie cutter CLI commands that you can use to get that information yourself if you needed to. So you don't have to worry about what's the CLI that goes in here. Then automated documentation is a key tenet. It's a customer I met a couple of days ago. He gave me a better term for that, is continuous benchmarking. So it's like every day I want a benchmark of my environment, of my configuration. By default, we do weekly, but you can always go and change it. By default, it's 6 a.m. Sunday morning, but you can change it to be weekly or whatever you want, right? And then health checks. So the feature coverage is, we try to cover all the major features. There are still few gaps. NSX Manager, all the components, configuration, edges, DLRs, ESXi host, load balancer, security aspect, and NetX, and visual diagram. The one big piece missing is guest introspection that I'm aware of, and there may be some others. All right, so without further ado, let's jump in. We'll try to do a live demo.
Yep, finger crossed. All right, before I get into demo, I really quickly wanted to go over NSX-PowerOps. This is our Hamad's blog website. It basically, we have the whole blog in here, giving the information about our tool. And also, the cool thing about this blog is we have all this documentation that we're going to present. Because of time, we won't be able to go through each document and what exactly it's doing. But all that information is available here, and these are clickable sample files, which you can take a look also. We also have a step-by-step deployment guide, and it talks a little bit about if you are running into some issues during installation, some common issues are available there also.
Okay. So the bottom of this has, if you go all the way to the bottom, whenever we hear about any issues, we just post it at the on our blog. So if you run into any issues, you'll see. I know this is the best place to come and look at the known issues. I know the site is horrible, but we just want to get it out there, right?
Great. We also have, our main landing page, GitHub. This is where you can download the project.
So if you go to NSX-PowerOps.com, you have links to everything from that one place, GitHub, install, and whatnot.
Cool. So I'll go ahead and get started. Because of the resolution, the Excel file might look funny, but we'll try our best to zoom in and out. It's really easy to install. There is really not much to install the tool. All you have to do is just download that GIF file, unzip it, and you'll see this NSX-PowerOps.ps1. Just run it like this. I already ran it previously, and I already have a profile created, so I'm going to go ahead and go to my default profile, and I'll quickly go over that piece. It will go ahead and make the connection. Usually take the...
So if you have multiple environments, you don't need to put credentials for each of them individually. You just create a profile for site 1, site 2, lab, whatever you want, and then just run it like that.
So first option you will see in here, which is grayed out for me, is install NSX PowerOps dependencies. Earlier in this slide, I mentioned 2 dependencies. One was the pester, and the other one was the posh SSH, and also PowerNSX. I take care of all that in this field. So if you don't have any of those installed, or you do not have the correct version installed, this field will be green, and you have to run it first to make sure the dependencies are there. Then you'll be able to proceed with the other option of the tool. One thing I quickly want to bring up is, dependencies. Obviously, having the correct operating system, correct PowerShell version, having Excel, Microsoft Excel installed, those are dependencies users have to take care of by themselves. And then the number 2 option is connection profile. All you have to do in that menu is hit number 2. It will take you to a sub-menu, and we can quickly talk about, creating a new profile. If you have profiles created you want to delete, you can do that. You can set the current profile and also the default profile. Under the create connection profile, when you're going to create that, obviously it's going to ask you, for your NSX IP addresses, your vCenter credentials, and NSX credentials. You can save all that. We save it locally on the machine, wherever you're running it. Everything is encrypted by using the Windows encryption keys. So whoever have access to this machine can potentially use to decrypt it also. So just a quick disclaimer. Let's go back in the main menu. And we have number 3, which is configure schedule task. You can schedule the documentation. I have 2 different profiles. I can go ahead and configure one of the profile as I wanted to, by default, automate the documentation. As Hamad mentioned earlier, it's for by default Sunday at 6 o'clock, but you can change that, right?
As you can see, moving back and forth in menu, X, all that. So you don't need to know scripting. It's just very easy for your ops guys to use it.
Yep. It will also in the bottom tell you your default profile, the one you have set, the current profile you're already logged into, and if it's connected or not. And underneath that, we have a output directory folder. This is the folder. Every time you start this program, this folder gets created. It has a timestamp, and anything you're going to run within the documentation menu or in the health check menu will be saved under that folder. If you don't run anything and just exit it out, the folder remains empty, and we go ahead and clean it off. We delete it off. So really the meat of this product comes under number 4 and number 5. So we wanted to kind of rush to get to this so we can show you more about the documentation. In the documentation, we have a bunch of options. Number 1 is something we added in 2.5, which is run all the following documentation options. None of these needs any user input. All you have to do is hit number. Let's say if I wanted to run all NSX component, or I'll just go ahead and run number 2. So just for the demo purposes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and do a visual diagram. So I'm going to go ahead and run number 4. And while it's happening in the background, I have some pre-created files that we can go
So
over.
as you can see, the way it's broken down is environment documentation, networking documentation, security documentation. We may not have time to go through all of it, so I'll just give a quick preview. So the environment documentation, NSX components, what it does, it documents everything you have configured on NSX Manager, controllers, edges, DLRs, so things like what are the IPs, which storage is deployed on, which logical switch or which DB port group is deployed on, NTP config, so this is the NSX Manager, how much memory and stuff is being used. This is a cool one we added. A lot of customer asked that, hey, we have licenses, but we don't really have a way to see how much are we consuming. So this will give you how much you have in total and how much you are using. It's showing 0 here because we are using some internal key which gives us unlimited licensing. But for you guys, you may have a better number in there. And then you have, all the config, a lot of questions that we ask, especially if you're a partner, like what vCenter version you're running, which update you're running, which build number you're running. All of that information is in here. You don't really need to ask anybody. So what I usually do is when I'm going to a customer for some design review or anything, I just ask them, hey, can you please run this set of documents and send it to me? And I review all of this, and before going into the customer, I already know what they're running, what things are not done right, where the mistakes are, all kind of stuff. I already know before going into a customer environment. So we heavily use tabs, so you'll see the tabs at the bottom for controllers and edges and DLRs. So I had a customer, I don't know if Matt and those guys are in the room, I don't see, but they were running, they had 200 NAT rules that they had to configure for every deployment, and they were documenting that manually. All of those are being documented automatically, load balancing profiles, everything that you want or you have configurable is documented in here. And as we said, continuous benchmarking. Anything changes, just pick up the one from last week, 2 days ago, just do a diff, Excel diff. We don't do it, but you can, basically it's text file, you can diff, and you know exactly if somebody fat-fingered enabled to a disable a /27 to a /28 or whatever, you know exactly what has changed. So the mean time to resolution, hopefully, will cut it down. So this is the components one. The second one within the environment is the ESXi host. The idea here is we're not documenting everything on ESXi host because there's just tons, right? So we're focusing on NSX stuff. So what I'm interested in is things like, routing tables. So this is the piece that I mentioned about desired and realized state. So if you go to the routing table, this is the distributed routing table at the ESXi host. And you have a tab for each ESXi host. So if a host is acting up or something happened, you can come in here, you know exactly how it looked when it was working and now when, for example, it's broken. Think about it, let's say you're level 1, level 2 guys or who may not have a lot of, who may not have NSX training and whatnot. Normally what happens, and I met a customer yesterday who was telling me about it, what happens is anytime a problem happens, they just call the engineer or the architect, is down. And then it's your job to figure it out. The idea here is that they should be able to create a new set of document, do a diff, and call the network engineer saying, hey, yesterday we had 2 default route, now we only have 1. Or, yesterday we had the VIP version as this, and today the VIP version number has changed. So that will help, again, cut down the mean time to resolution, improve the communication between the operations team and the network engineers and architects and so on and so forth. And as I mentioned that if you scroll down a little bit with the routing, so if you up to the routing table, you'll see on the left that this thing, if we can scroll, yeah. So we also document the command that you can run to get this information, right? So you don't need to run the whole document again. And as you can see, this is not a very intuitive command, So you don't need to worry about what's the host ID or DLR ID. You just go to the tab, whichever routing table you need, just plug it into central CLI, and you get the exact same information, right? So again, cuts down the time that usually you take to get to this kind of information. So these were the NSX components. The next one is the routing. The first one in the routing is Excel. is the Visio. So do we have the Visio?
Yeah.
Yeah. So within the Visio, and a big thanks to our PowerNSX brothers, Nick Bradford, he created this as a tool called Diagram NSX, and that's the power of NSX PowerOps, is that bring it in, right? Some tools were already created, and they were one-offs. Now there's a platform. Just bring everything in, make it menu-driven, and everybody can use it. So what this is that it automatically creates the routing configuration of your NSX. So how many logical switches, DLRs, edges that you have, all of that is created here. So this is zero touch. I didn't touch anything. Puneet hit 4 a few minutes ago, and then voila, this is there. Another cool thing here is that the edges are not pretty picture only. You also have a backup of the config done as well. So if you go to shape data in XML config, it has the whole config that you can use to create this edge again. Like, somebody deleted it or something happened and you want to go back and maybe check a config, maybe create it again or whatever. So this XML is saved with each edge icon that you see. So if it's a load balancer with tons of app rules and stuff, you probably don't want to do it manually again, right? You can use this saved config to recreate all that information. As you can see, the BGP config and all the things are in the format that API ready that you can make a call and deploy a new edge. So let's move on to the next routing one, which is the actual routing table. So this is where the desired and realized state spill I was talking about. So the top piece, so the idea here is that we bring the desired state, what I configured, and what it resulted in together in one view, right? So at the top here, you see that all the config, like redistribution, static config, global config, static routes, default gateway, like all the things that you configure. And a lot of these things are deep down in menus. Like, for example, if you ask me, hey, where would you configure a BGP filter? It will take me like 30 seconds to remember in the UI how many, like 10 clicks that I have to do to get there. So this basically brings that together with the routing table. So this is the desired config, and the realized config is the routing table. So, and we don't just document routing tables. So if you go down, so you got routing table, forwarding table, BGP table, BGP neighbor table, same thing with OSPF and OSPF neighbor table. So essentially for troubleshooting and in a routing issue, the key things that you usually need from NSX side, you have it, right? So again, a network, something goes down, a NOC guy calls a network engineer and he's at the mall or some other place. He doesn't have to necessarily go home, VPN, and get this information himself. He can say, hey, send me this information, email it to me, and he can quickly look, and again, the guy can just do a diff and say, well, this is the specific piece that has changed, right? So again, coming to the same theme of continuous benchmarking allows you to cut down the mean time to resolution. All right, so we also do it for DLRs, and for DLR we also grab routing table from the controller. So without going into too much detail, essentially what I'm trying to say is we got you covered.
Yep.
Right? Okay. So the next piece is load balancing. Again, a big shout out to my colleague and brother Dale from Australia. He's part of our team. I asked him, hey Dale, we have customers who have a number of edges deployed for load balancing purpose. And when you have like 10 VIPs, 15 VIPs per edge, and you have 15, 20 edges, then it's very hard for them to know, hey, which edge is hosting which VIP, which pool member, what IP, what profile. All of this becomes, problematic. And one of the customers had to write a routine themselves and like, we need to do this. So he created this and shared with us. So it starts with summary. It lists all the edges that you have deployed that have load balancer configured. That's the key thing. And then within each, it has all the documentation of the edge name, the VIP, the status, and he also does, obviously, as you can see, red, green to tell you if the pool status is down, the pool member is down, and whatnot. So again, if you have a load balancer deployment, thank you, sir. So if you have a load balancer deployment, this hopefully will help you a lot. And as I showed before, in the edge configuration, all the application profile details, if you have app rules, regexes and whatnot, everything is here, right? And it's obviously automated, so nobody is fat fingering anything here.
So yeah, apologies for going really fast. We wanted to cover a lot, and we also want some time in the end for Q&As. So start lining up later on if you have any questions.
Yeah. All right, so the crown jewel of all of this is distributor firewall documentation, because this is probably one of the most commonly used feature. Now, Damien, don't hold me up if you feel that I'm doing a lot of product bashing or whatnot, but I'm a user of the user interface, just like you guys, right? And some of you who are in enterprise, you just have your own UI to work with. Now, we work with a lot of customers, so I'm going at customer 1 and 2. As a partner, you may be going in different customers, or you may have multiple environments. And if you need to correlate that how many security groups so let me tell you a story. Do you have time for storytelling?
Yeah.
Maybe a couple of minutes. So, worked with a customer, and the customer was having some performance issues, and looked at the security group configuration, or how many security groups they have, like about 300 or 400 security groups. And we knew that the security group configuration is the one that's causing the issue. Now, what we can do is obviously go through support and go through engineering. Engineering have their beautiful internal tools, and they can look at all this stuff. But as me and you, how do I do that, right? Do I have to go and click on each security group and look at its definition, take a screenshot, take a screenshot, take a screenshot, and then you figure out which one is good and which one is not really good? So what we do here is that we go and we document everything there is to know about your environment from a security perspective. So if we start at, we're at security group config, so how many security groups you have, how many they have dynamic criteria, static criteria, what is the criteria? So I had a customer who had like about 600 security groups, and all of them using regex. And we know regex is, it takes CPU, because you're, doing a lot of filtering, and that was causing some issues in their environment. And when I looked at this, I knew like, oh, you need these security groups to be redone. So if we go to the summary page, the tab, the first one, so what we do here is we document each security group and how many translated VMs and translated IPs are there. So, and you can sort this. So right away, the first thing I usually do is I sort this, and I know which security group is the top user, right? So I know like security group VDI has 1,500 members. And if, for example, if I see 1,500 members, but translated IPs are 3,000, what does that tell me? They have IPv6 enabled. And the question is, are you using IPv6? Well, most likely the answer is no, right? But now what that means is you're doubling things up. In a small environment, these things don't really matter. But when you're going to 5,000, 8,000, 9,000 VM environments, all of these things start adding up, right? It's just natural. So, this is now the data that you can use to really get an insight into your environment. So for example, the customer had a security group for VDI, a security group for prod, a security group for Windows. So, and each of them had about 1,000, give or take 1 or 2 VMs, members. And I asked them, if you go to the last tab, which is the VM info tab, you can see how many VMs NSX knows about and what are their IPs and whatnot. So I looked in here, and they only had 1,100 VMs. But when I looked at the translated IPs across all the security group, they're like 8,000. So what that means, you have 8x duplication in the IPs across different security groups, right? I mean, again, small environments is fine, but when you start growing big, these are things that are important to keep an eye on. But how do you keep an eye on those things, right? So that's the idea. This is the learning that, from all the field experience. I have a lot of colleagues of mine in the room. We're bringing this experience and what we can do to help the customer get that visibility. Now, that's a little advanced, but for basic use as well, if we go to the firewall rules, for example, what we document is each firewall rule, each section. So the green line represents a section, and then you have all of your firewall rules, and then we document, is it a security group, a tag, or security tag, a IP set, or whatever it is. All of that is documented in here with the type. And all of those things are hyperlinked. So you click on the security group hyperlink name, and it will take you to the definition of that security group. So it will help you go between these different things. And when you're looking at your environment, you can very quickly see how you have deployed, how you have designed, how many rules do you have, and whatnot. And then we have all the things that you need. So, for example, if you go to redirection firewall rules, which is the third tab, in my environment, I didn't have any NetX or network introspection. So if you're doing anything like with Palo Alto Networks or Checkpoint and Trend Micro, those rules, they will be documented in here as well. Then you have the DFW exclusion, so how many VMs you have as part of the exclusion list. You have the services, the security tags, and we not only document the tag themselves and how many VMs are using it, we also document which VM is using which tag. And because this is data, I can do manipulation in here to see which, let's say if one VM is member of how many security groups, or one VM is tagged with how many security tags, right? So because now this is data in your hand, and you guys are much better than at data manipulation than I'm. So you can, once you have it in this format, the hope is that you can use it as you like. Now, quick time check, a couple more minutes. So the use cases are incredible, and it's amazing that when you give something to the customer, how they use it. There are so many different ways I've seen customers use this. For example, communication between application teams, IT audit, and governance, and firewall admins. How do you tell the app guy which rules I've created for your application? Take a screenshot, right? And then how do you tell, like, well, this entity is a group or tag? Now, with this, you can share exactly what you need to show to the firewall, to the application guy. The IT audit guy, so I was working with a bank last month, and what they're doing with this is they put this automated scheduled document in a shared path, which obviously the firewall team and the IT auditors both have access to. Because before they were always like, I need to know what rules you have created for this thing, I need explanation for that, and there's just a lot of back and forth. And now what it is there, and the audit guys are like, I'm happy if I don't have to bug you. I have this information, I'll come to you if I need anything, right? So I've seen a lot of different use cases for the documentation. So now I think let's very quickly hop over to the health check. So as you can see here, when the thing is done, it will tell you where the file is, what the file name is, and whatnot. So let's go into the documentation, the health check. So the way it's organized is you have non-interactive, interactive, and some beta stuff that we're working with. I think this was very cool, but the beta one, but there are some things that we are not catching, but the kind of information it generates is still very useful, so we kind of left it in here if you guys want to play. And also, this is not our day job. This is our, not our, Puneet's after hours work mostly. So if any of you guys would like to contribute to the project, bring whatever expertise you have, or if you want to build expertise, we have a lot of tickets and we can work with you, and you can take a ticket which is simple and you can get started, right? So you don't have to go in and configure the whole thing. You can bring in, hey, I have this script that I'm using, and how can I incorporate that into the tool? And we'd be happy to walk you through, help you, and expand like that. So due to shortage of time, we can't obviously run through all of them. Let's just run through number 6, which is the VIP version test. So what that does is it checks what NSX Manager version you're running, and then it checks all the ESXi hosts in your environment and makes sure that the VIP that NSX Manager has is actually installed on all the hosts. We've seen environments where that doesn't really happen because some hosts were not rebooted or there were some other issues. So in my environment, what I have is I have upgraded from I think 6.4 to 6.4.1, but I didn't upgrade all 3 hosts. I only upgraded the compute host. I didn't upgrade the edge. So as you can see here that it's checking and telling me that the edge, common edge 1 and common edge 2, the expected version was 65085, but it was 650756. So I can already see that this host has some issue or it needs to be looked into. The web is not right. And at the so this guy here, you can see the compute one, the expected, and the current is correct, so it's all green. And then it also runs this last check where it checks that if all the hosts had the right wib or not. So obviously here 2 hosts don't, so it's saying, hey, you have a couple of hosts that don't really have that.
Right. The way we get the correct web version is first we check for the NSX version, which version you have installed, and if it's paired with the correct web version or not.
So one last thing I want to show from a health check perspective is VTAP to VTAP. So when you do a deployment, like 8 out of 10 issues are what? MTU. And these are hard to troubleshoot, especially because sometimes you're the VI admin, you don't have control of the fabric, and then if you say something's not working, usually the other side thinks that they have configured it correctly, right? But there may have been some port or some place where it was not configured correctly. How we can help that communication between the NSX guy and maybe the fabric, or if you are the same person on both sides, to help you how you can identify the information. So VTAP to VTAP test, what it does, it goes to each ESXi host, and from each VTAP on the host, it pings all the other VTAPs in the environment. And it is multi-site aware. So if you have active primary, secondary, it will ask you, hey, do you want to do multi-site or single site? And it will ping both sites, and it will document in this format how many pings were done, how many passed, how many failed. And then what this is saying is that from host this, and in your environment, it may be the name of the host. From this host, the VMK number is this, which had the IP this, to IP this, which is hosted at VMK number this. On this host, there's a path failure. So you know exact path in the environment where you have MTU failure. Now you can map these things to the physical ports and whatnot but it is a leg up, right? Because you know exactly where the issue is. For example, in this environment, 2 racks, and within the rack, MTU was set right, but between the rack at the TOR level, the MTU was not set right. So I have partial success, and whatnot. And we have the ping results where we document the actual raw output as well. So if you wanted to see what was tested and what actually failed, all of that information in here. And another key thing is that you have the min, average, max. So it may have worked, but it may be taking 3 milliseconds or whatnot. So you can kind of come in and see how long it actually took. All right. So flipping back to this guy, demo time is over. Another great surprise that we got yesterday or day before was when somebody said, hey, I tried NSX PowerOps and it was cool in the HOL. And I was like, what? HOL, PowerOps? It didn't really connect. And then I found out that the HOL guys, they also like the tool because most of them are field guys like us, and they already included PowerOps in the labs.
One of the HOL labs.
Yeah, HOL labs. So if you want to try it, 1903, it already has everything installed. You can go ahead, the chapter is there. They did better documentation than I did, so we probably will steal some of that. But yeah, thanks to the HOL team, and Puneet is also part of HOL. If you want to try the
NSX Cloud.
NSX Cloud, please do visit.
1922.
All right, so we took a lot of time, but better than hearing from us for another 5-10 minutes, let's hear from Matt on his experience and his team. And thanks for the UNH guys to agree to come and do this and be here.
Thanks, Matt. So kind of as to what Hamad mentioned, we were a very early NSX customer. I think we were customer 40-something. So the Day2 challenges were, I'm going to say, fairly immediate for us. I will say that for PowerOps, two of the biggest things that it helped us with, actually three, because we're going to talk about three things. Our challenge for wider adoption for distributed firewall like microseg was, okay, we have NSX installed, it's great. New workloads that come in, they go in NSX, that's no problem. The challenge for us became transitioning existing workloads into NSX without a whole lot of disruption, basically, to that app or its uptime. And there's only 4 people in our organization that can assist a rather large number of customers with doing this. The documentation piece is another one. What the documentation that they did a great job of illustrating for you does for us is it helps bridge the gap for, I guess, between the virtual networking and then the actual physical networking in some cases. The way that the NSX responsibility delineates in our organization is the infrastructure VMware folks are responsible for NSX, and the networking guys are responsible for basically everything else. So what this stuff does is it shows basically network lingo to network people in a way that they're used to seeing it, in a way that they're more comfortable with seeing it, and that helps us in terms of adoption. So they're not just thinking, oh, this is something that the virtual guys are talking about, and I don't know what that is. It's a black box to me, or something like that. It's also helping us with our other investments. So we are a VRNI and log insight shop. The big piece for us there is the configuration changes. What changed? So there, like I said, there's 4 people for the NSX stuff on our end, but we also collaborate fairly regularly with about a 10 or 12 person networking team. We don't always check with each other. We have different schedules. People go on vacations and that kind of thing. So when we get an occasional panicked phone call that was, hey, route printing doesn't work in some cluster lab, we can then go look at our documentation and be like, oh, I saw that maybe an overzealous junior admin applied a security tag or something that they shouldn't have. And then they automatically got added to a policy and so on and so forth, and then something got blocked. The next one for us was the cross VC for DR. So we are part of a larger university system of New Hampshire, which includes Keene and Plymouth. So we use their sites as DR locations. We are fortunate to have a very good relationship with our WAN team and our WAN group, but we do often need to use especially the VTEP tool to do MTU troubleshooting. It's always MTU troubleshooting. The piece for us is to not only show them where it's happening, but where it's failing, because our WAN team provides services for the entire state of New Hampshire, so we have a lot of physical places for them to go. So being able to nail down what that is and where it is has been, I would say, really helpful for us really quickly. In general, I'll also say with the documentation and I will freely admit that it has evolved our DR planning and our runbooks to something that is much better than it was before. So before it was screenshots in a lot of cases. Now for us, it's every other day, I think. Documentation that gets spit out, uploaded to our document repository, and it just lives there. And it's available for all the relevant parties to check in on. I will say I think we're the only ones who look at it right now, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. But yeah, that's kind of what I have to say in general. So
great. Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it. So you guys, we have a few minutes left. Any questions, feel free to come up to the mic while I try to keep on talking. So some of the stuff that we talked about already, continuous benchmarking and, consumable reporting, from our side, we are hoping that it will help the GSS call. One of the other things that we saw is the first time you deploy, you find problems. And I think it happened.
Yep. So we actually found I would say, a poorly configured conflicting security policies. So we were splitting out stuff by app and app, and then this app kind of did both. Like it had IIS on it and a web portal front end, and we had two policies that were in conflict with each other, and this found this. But we pushed 2, hit enter, and waited.
Question?
Yeah, specifically for the firewall rule reporting, is there a way to export that to kind of a text file that can be, scheduled, automated, and the diffs be sent out as opposed to having Excel files that you have to open Excel and run a diff against?
You can convert it into CSV. We have not really, to be honest, done that. But we've had that asked before and asked that, hey, can I take this config and in turn push it to another environment and have it recreated? But the idea here is that, between the two of us and the support team we talked about, we don't really have a lot of cycles. But if that's something that's useful for you, so GitHub, open the issue, right? That's definitely, and if you want to contribute, then we can help you. But it's not something that we have on the radar. There are other things like the Excel challenge. Some of the customers have said, well, we don't have Excel or we can't put Excel. The amount of time it's going to take for us to go and redo that is so much that it's probably better for us to add more features, work on NSXT, all that kind of stuff. So
Thank you.
Sure. We actually do have one of our colleagues, Shazad, in the room. He is the author of a small medium data center, and NSX PowerOps definitely plays really well on that. Do we have any books?
Yes.
All right, so we have the author and the book. So if anybody wants signed books, definitely talk to Shazad. From licensing perspective, as it's open source, you can't call VMware GSS. I think that's obvious. Open issue on GitHub. We try to be very responsive. When you go on GitHub, you'll see a lot of things. So we try to be transparent as well. So anything that we are working on, we try to open an issue about it. And we're hoping if any of you wants to take that, hey, I can do this, would love for you to contribute. PowerNSX is something that we mentioned. There was a session this morning. Definitely go check it out. And the blog that we mentioned. One last thing that I want to say is that everybody says do the survey. Obviously do the survey. But the point of doing survey is if you want to see projects like this, right? You want to see like NSXT version of it, or you want anything to do that you want to be done as part of this program, or then definitely fill the survey, put your comments in, and tell us what you want. And if we don't hear a lot, then that's how the sessions get approved and dropped for next year. So we hope that we see you guys again. We're doing it in Barcelona as well.
Right.
If anyone is coming there. So.
Quick raise of hand, how many guys have using PowerOps? Just so people who are new, one thing I do quickly want to mention is if you install this and run it, it will not change anything in your environment.
Yeah.
This tool is only get, so all the API calls we make is just get, so it's
read-only.
safe to use. We never make any changes.
Yeah, we had feature requests saying, hey, can you make this change? Or for example, if SSH is disabled, can you enable SSH? And when you're done, disable SSH. We didn't want to get into that business. It's 100% read-only. You can use read-only credentials for this. And if you wanted to make a change, you can obviously open and change things and make a change. One more thing is some of the health checks you may see it asks for inputs because we don't know what your environment is. But for your environment, those inputs are constant, right? So you can just change it and just put hard code those things so you don't have to manually put those things every time, right? So, having said that, any further questions?
Yeah. So, does it support NSX for that?
Yes, it does support. We've not extensively tested everything, but we've tested with 6.7. And it did work. We didn't test 6.5, but the way it works, we are pretty confident that it hasn't changed much. But if you run into anything, let us know.
Yeah, the API was utilized backward compatible, so he's working with the latest version, should work with the previous one also. So we don't have to check each dots, but yeah, to test most of them.
And this will show a GRE tunnel configs as well.
So.
That was a little bit tricky, but.
tunnel config where? Sorry.
On the XML file you're showing.
Right, so whatever configuration you have done on NSX, so the question was, okay, would it show the GRE config? What I would say is that anything that you can configure on NSX, from edges or manager or whatnot, it has that, right? It has everything. We don't, so one of the things some people have said that it may look like too much information, but the idea is to make sure that that information is there, that for example, OSPF is not configured. It has to be there, so if somebody configures it by mistake, you can do a diff, right? So that sometimes you may feel that it's a little bit too much information, but we left it there for a purpose.
Thank you.
All right. So for guys who ask questions, if Shahzad, if you don't mind, sharing the book, I think that's a great read for the small medium businesses. All right, guys, thanks a lot. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, UNISH team. We appreciate it.